Hey Jeff, Heggie, Daily Success Strategies. Thanks for being back with me. Today I've got Betsy Butterick back with me, and we're talking about communication again. What we talk about today is reframing, and I love the way she goes about this. And rather than talk about it right now, I'm going to let her get into it, and then I'll be back with you in a minute.
I love reframing. I think that this is, it's kind of a game. Perspective is a big part of my work and part of my life is, coming back to that element of choice. How am I seeing things right now? And if I were to change my perspective, and there's an exercise I do, the takeaway of which is when we change our perspective, we can have a different experience. So that lends itself, when I talk about reframing, is how can we reframe what's happening now, or maybe our natural reaction to something, and put things in a different framework that would allow us to take a different perspective, which would allow us to experience something different or new. Reframing in the positive for me is something that, when I was doing research, and I hear this in coaching all the time, coaches say, don't do this, don't stop running, or, don't quit on the play. It's like when we tell people what we want them to do instead of what we don't want them to do, we're much more likely to get the outcome that we're looking for. And going back to Heidi, I love her. Heidi's family to me. And I remember it was our first year at Oxy, and we're huddled up. And so we've got really smart student athletes, right? And because of that, Heidi explained a drill we were going to do. And she then said something like, and it doesn't mean that you can't do this. And I don't want you to do this. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be able to do this. And she said so many don'ts and doesn't that by the end, the student athletes were looking at me like, what does she mean? What is I've lost track of what our whole goal or purpose is. And that was really, for me, an experience that became a catalyst for thinking about how are we using language in a sports context, combining it with the fact that we don't understand negatives. So subconsciously, we don't process negatives in the same way that we understand them when we speak them. So I can say to you, Jeff, Jeff, don't do that, right? And you're like, oh, Betsy doesn't want me to do that. When we hear don't, and this shows up a basketball example, I kick myself because I think about how many times I did this. End of game situation. Let's say there's 2 seconds left. We're up by 1. The other team has to inbound the ball, go full court, and it's timeout. And so I tell my team, okay, the only thing we can't do is foul. Whatever you do, don't foul. And everyone's sitting there going, yeah, okay, don't foul, don't foul. And then we go out, and the ball's inbounded, and within a second, it's like, tweet, foul. And everyone's like, oh, we just talked about it, The only thing you couldn't do was foul. They understood, and yet subconsciously, a negative acts as a little blip on the radar. We don't process it the same way, and so we actually pay more attention to the word that comes next. So every time I say don't foul, what it's saying internally is foul, foul, foul. And then we see that translate into language, and there's so many different, or into experience. There's so many different examples. I love golf. I'm a terrible golfer, but I love it. And I think about the number of times I'm like 4 inches away from the hole, and I'm like, okay, whatever you do, just don't leave it short. And then it's like, Mert. So can we be intentional with our language? Can we rephrase in the positive, and doing so, reframe the situation that we're in and allow us to have a different experience? So let's use language intentionally. And this becomes a game that teams play. I'll do an exercise with them where I'll say, okay, I want you to write down all the negative phrases that you hear your coaches say, specifically ones that start with don't or stop. And they get so excited. And they're like, oh, coach says this, coach says this. And even 30 seconds, I'll say, okay, stop. Now I want you to rephrase each of those in the positive. And so it's a little challenging, but they do it. And then it becomes a game that they play within their program. Anytime somebody says don't, someone yells out rephrase, and then they're challenged to rephrase and say what they really want instead of what they don't want. And when we do that, the long-term effect is, we know from research on teams of all kind, again, athletic teams or corporate teams, that positive environments outperform negative environments. They get better results. Positive leaders perform better under pressure. So can we use language to start to create a more positive environment? Absolutely. And those that do see greater success.
That is great. The don't, I love that. It reminded me of a story when my oldest daughter was a little younger. She was playing Little League, and we were in one community. My brother was coaching a team in another community, and we were playing each other. And her cousin was the pitcher. And My brother said all week, all I said is, just don't hit to you. Don't hit to you. So second pitch, he nails her.
Absolutely. Yeah, there you go. That's a perfect example. Perfect example. And I'm thinking about, even tossing things in the house, right? It's like, okay, just don't hit the lamp, right? And it's like, just like what our brain is so smart. And when we tell it things, it focuses on those things. The thing we don't want to do is what it's going to focus on, because that's where our focus is. So you talk about mental training. It's like, yeah, reframing in the positive, rephrasing in the positive. So crucial if we hope to experience success. If not, you say whatever you want.
Hey, thanks again, Betsy. Appreciate that. There's so many good things we can get out of that. First of all, telling people what we want them to do rather than what we don't want them to do, guaranteed to get better results. Also, how can you take something, reframe it into a different conversation to create different results? And finally, looking at it, a positive environment outperforms a negative environment. And like she said, a positive leader is going to outperform a negative leader. So what are the things that you can do from this conversation on reframing, on this conversation about communication, to improve your organization, to improve your team, to improve whatever it is that you're doing? Take a look at that and really analyze what the options are you have and how you can do that. Now, Betsy is available on all social media, online, everything. I'm going to put all of her stuff in the show notes so you can make sure to follow her. But if you go to betsybutterick.com, you'll be able to find that all as well. Also, when we're talking about reframing, all these different things, a lot of this comes down to mindset. And as you know, if you've been listening to this, I love working with high achievers that are trying to get themselves to another level. So if you want to check out High Achievers Mindset Secrets, if you're looking to take things to another level, go to mindset.jeffheggie.com and check that out there. Or send me a DM or an email and just say you're interested. We'll set up a free strategy call and we can talk about these things some more. Thanks for being with me, and I'll be back again tomorrow. See ya.